Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and you might be wondering, where did I get these awesome robes from? Well, the Jedi Temple was having a fire sale. Everything had to go. I'm just kidding. I looted the Jedi Temple with a bunch of clone troopers. But these robes are freaking awesome. I mean, mine smells kind of like a Twi'lek, but I'll get that, I'll dry clean it or something. Anyway, today I want to talk about something really cool, Darth Vader. Darth Vader was perhaps one of the most formidable fighters the galaxy had ever seen. Not only did he have an extremely high midichlorian count, making him the most powerful Force user in history, he was also an extremely talented battlefield commander and fighter. Anakin started soldiering earlier than your average military leader. He experienced his first major battle before the age of 10 as a child soldier, and was crucial in helping the Naboo Planetary Defense Forces defeat the Trade Federation Droid Security Forces. He went on to be a talented Jedi who excelled at handling hostile negotiations and also suppressing dissidents and enemies of the state. During the Clone Wars, he won the respect of the clones he led into battle, pulled off many stunning victories, and he put fear in the hearts of his enemies. His actions as a Jedi and loyal servant of the Chancellor had a huge impact on the course of history. And after the Jedi betrayed the Republic and, more importantly, themselves, Anakin alone stayed true to his principles and continued protecting the Republic and the Empire from its enemies. Even when his former master had cut off their friendship by impregnating Anakin's wife, Anakin refused to let the situation sever him from his duty, even when the only family he knew excised him from their ranks and truncated his term on the Jedi Council. Anakin refused to be dismembered from his duty to the citizens of the galaxy. Even after being disarmed and removed from those he loved, he continued fighting. The sheer pain and anguish should have surgically amputated his desire for life, but he limbered up and was reborn, Darth Vader, stronger, angrier, and a cut above any Force user the galaxy had ever seen. He was public enemy number one according to the Rebellion, especially after encountering his monstrous presence during the latter moments of the Battle of Scariff. So much so that the Rebel Alliance Special Forces invented their own Anti-Vader Drill in order to counter his attacks. This is what we're going to be talking about today. With the Death Star plans safely beamed aboard the Rebel flagship Profundity, the Alliance to restore the Republic had secured a great victory over Scarif. It came at a high cost, of course. The entire Rogue One team had perished on the planet after the Death Star turned on its own Imperial facility, which means no more sequels for the entire cast, but potentially prequels. But the plans had cleared the shield gates, and Raddus and the Rebels were on their way home with the blueprints, until Vader and his Devastator abruptly appeared into the system and slammed right through a GR-75 medium transport. Vader's capital ship then made quick work of the entire Rebel fleet and disabled the Profundity, allowing him to board the ship and retrieve the stolen plans. Now, Force users are not able to slow down their perception of time, but what they can do is sense incoming threats before they actually happen, kind of like those precogs from Minority Report. This is why it's certainly pretty hard to ambush a Force user. This also means a well-trained Force user can sense when you're going to fire a blaster bolt at them and exactly where. Combined with certain lightsaber forms, a skilled Jedi can almost indefinitely block all incoming shots. In the narrow corridors of a Rebel ship, Darth Vader had all the advantages against the Rebel troopers he faced on board. The incoming fire was only coming from one direction, so Vader's senses weren't overwhelmed. It's much harder to survive on a larger battlefield when there's a million things going around and millions of blaster bolts flying in from every direction. And so, with danger coming from only one direction, Vader was essentially able to cut through the entire Rebel opposition and nearly took back the plans for the Death Star. Now, most of the Rebel troopers who faced Darth Vader did perish, but some did survive, and they were able to spread word of Darth Vader's uncanny abilities. Remember, at the time, very few people in the Imperial military actually knew about Vader and his special skills. Most people in the Rebellion thought Vader was just some kind of stupid story or Imperial propaganda. People report seeing crazy stuff all the time when they're stressed out or in the middle of a combat zone. And all the Jedi had also been wiped out for almost 2 decades, so the Force was basically a myth and not to be taken seriously. But after Darth Vader took over the Profundity with all that power and strength, the Rebellion started treating him seriously and came up with a game plan to deal with them. General Davitz Draven was a former Republic military intelligence officer and now leading the Alliance intelligence. He was in charge of Operation Fracture, an attempt to uncover Galen Erso's involvement with the Death Star project. Upon hearing accounts of the massacre on the profundity, he began researching ways to counter a Force user. During the Clone Wars, Draven had mainly worked with fleet commanders and strategists and had no encounters with any Jedi generals, but he did know enough about the Jedi to understand that Vader was some type of Force user. He knew that the rebel troopers needed some special tactics and maybe even equipment to be able to overcome someone like him, especially if the Empire had more of these Force-using lightsaber-wielding warriors in their ranks. The massive casualties that the Jedi suffered during the Geonosis Arena battle would have been a good case study for Draven to look at. The Geonosis Arena battle was a well-known event. Over 200 Jedi had entered the battlefield, and only around a few dozen survived. The Jedi, as skilled as they were overwhelmed by fire coming from multiple directions and explosives that were used very successfully against them. This was the first part of the Anti-Vader Drill. You had to spread out your men and engage Vader or any other Force user from multiple angles. If you can get enough blaster bolts simultaneously on target, it can become physically impossible for a Force user to block every incoming round. Along with using overwhelming blaster fire, rebels were taught to use incendiary grenades, detonators, and even flamethrowers. Flamethrowers were a preferred anti-Jedi weapon for Mandalorian bounty hunters. Anyway, these types of area effect weapons were pretty difficult to block with a lightsaber and could force someone like Vader to dodge instead of block, buying more time and distance for your soldiers, which is really important when your foe is using a lightsaber. Unfortunately for General Draven and his rebel troopers, they actually had to put this method to test shortly after the Battle of Yavin. The rebels were celebrating the newly arrived fleet of Mon Cala cruisers at their secret Mako Ta base in the Outer Rim. Things were looking good for the rebellion. They went from losing their only capital ship, the Profundity, to getting about a dozen new MC-80 cruisers. They finally had a formidable fleet that could go against the Empire. Unfortunately, one of the guests at the party had betrayed the rebellion and gave the location of the space station to the Empire. All the rebel ships also had been disabled with a virus which locked their hyperdrives, preventing them from escaping. The codes that could deactivate the lockdown were located on the Executor. And so Leia and General Draven went on a mission to the Death Squadron's flagship to retrieve these codes. Although they were ultimately successful at getting these codes, while escaping, Vader catches up with them, and General Draven and all the rebel troopers stay behind trying to hold Darth Vader at bay, giving Leia a chance to get away with the Death Star the hyperdrive unlock codes. General Draven felt like this was a good way to redeem himself for not believing Jyn Erso during the Rogue One operation. The Anti-Vader Drill, as you would guess, did not work great. You see, Vader didn't need his lightsaber to deflect all the bolts. He simply deflected some and literally used the power of the Force to stop the others. A power, interestingly enough, that was rarely seen until Kylo Ren stopped Poe Dameron's shot during The Force Awakens. Anyway, Vader is able to quickly kill all the rebel troopers and then snaps General Draven's neck. While the rebel plan might have worked on a lesser Sith Lord or Inquisitor, Vader's powers were simply too great, and he could essentially create a force bubble around him that could basically stop any kind of projectile from hitting him. Many other Jedi and rebels have tried killing him before. Han Solo tried to use an AT-AT but failed. Several Jedi also tried to trap Vader and use Cortosis blades, which deactivated lightsabers on contact, but they also failed. In truth, there were very few things that could stop this man, but had General Draven come to me and asked me for help, I could have pointed out a few weaknesses that Darth Vader has. First, they didn't spread out enough when they faced Vader at the door. Second, don't use blasters. Use slug throwers if you got them. Jedi lightsabers can block solid metal projectiles, and then turn them into steaming hot liquid metal projectiles which can burn right through someone's face. Incendiary grenades and detonators are also a good choice. I wonder if Darth Vader has the same fear for fire that Sandor Clegane has. But a droid popper or EMP grenade would work even better. You see, most people in Anakin's position would have died from the injuries he suffered from Obi-Wan Kenobi and the River of Lava. But Anakin was so powerful in the Force that he was able to survive. The suit that Palpatine designed for him makes sure he's able to continue living. We actually do an entire video about this, including how Vader poops, if you are interested. It's a very interesting video and on top of our YouTube homepage. Vader also had extremely damaged organs, including massive amounts of scarring in his lungs and also damage to his nerves and cardiovascular system. The suit regulates all these things and keeps him alive, and also constantly injects a cocktail of chemicals into his blood to keep him going. He's basically a mess without a suit, and Palpatine purposely made it this way. I mean, look at Grievous. He had all of his organs replaced, so clearly in Star Wars they have the technology to make Anakin a functional being again. The reason why Palpatine would want his apprentice confined in a plastoid metal coffin is that it limits his strength and prevents Anakin, who probably had more natural strength than Palpatine, from killing his master. Even with the armor removed, it's said that Anakin can survive for a short period of time by using the Force to sustain his breathing and other bodily functions. Also, for some reason, Vader's suit is not properly grounded or shielded from electrical and EMP attacks. Another purposely built-in weakness that would allow Palpatine to neutralize his former apprentice. Because we all know that while Sidious is skilled with the lightsaber, he actually prefers using Force lightning instead. So yeah, if I were in charge of Rebel trooper training, I would encourage my men to bring as many droid poppers and EMP grenades as possible. Now, it won't completely kill Vader, he can still sustain himself with the Force, but it makes him considerably weaker and probably puts him in a defensive position, allowing you to escape, which is basically the best case scenario. Also, sand. Vader hates sand and it gets everywhere, including into his air filter, so it could pose a serious threat to his entire well-being. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.